Joining us now from Washington is the senior U.S. Senator from Iowa, Charles Grassley. Senator Grassley is a ranking member of the Senate's Judiciary Committee and a senior member of the Senate's Finance and Budget Committees. Welcome back to Newsmax TV, Senator.
Oh, I'm always glad to be with you, and let me compliment you on helping get out a very important message about fiscal conservatism and constitutional government.
Well, we thank you so much for your kind words. So let's get right to it. With Friday's budget deadline looming, House Speaker John Boehner is telling fellow Republicans to prepare for a government shutdown. Would you support another continuing resolution when budget negotiators are still about $30 billion apart on cuts for the rest of this current fiscal year?
I think the most important thing is that we do not shut down the government, because I know it's probably counterintuitive to all of your viewers, but you don't save money by shutting down the government, because there's certain contractual obligations that have to be met regardless. But I can assure you that I think that saving the $100 billion that has been the goal of the last election and now the goal of Republicans in the Congress, because that was a promise that was made. And I think we want the voters to know that we get the message from that election. And if there isn't anything else, they remember that we said we get it.
Senator, real quickly, House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan is unveiling his budget proposal for the next fiscal year, cutting trillions of dollars in spending and calling for reforms in Medicare and Social Security over the next decade. What's your reaction to that? And what's the budget approach in the Senate? You're
talking about saving $4 trillion. Well, that's measured against what we call the current services level of expenditure. And you don't have to increase as much as the current services level of expenditure would increase. And we're talking about modifying increases as opposed to really cutting expenditures. And so we're cutting down on the growth of government and not going along with the irresponsible approach of just automatically increasing because somebody said in 1974 under the budget law that we ought to measure government expenditures this way.
Senator, many Republicans say the debt ceiling shouldn't be raised. What is your take?
Well, my take is that we should have thought about not increasing the deficit debt limit before we spent the money. Once the money's spent, you're going to have to meet your obligations. But the point is that we've got tremendous leverage on not increasing the debt to get a lot of other things done that we want done. Tackling entitlements and tackling a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget. And I support moving in both of those areas. And the president has been very reluctant to do that, quite contrary to his a year ago when he appointed a deficit reduction commission, bipartisan.
Now, what are the consequences for Americans if President Obama gets his way and does indeed raise the debt ceiling?
Well, the consequences are not related to the debt ceiling itself. The consequences are going to be very bad if we don't make these very dramatic changes in the 22% level of expenditure that I already talked about. You got to preempt that. And also, if you don't tackle the 45% of the budget that are entitlements, that's off base. And for the long term, if we don't get a policy that a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget would establish, then of course it's business as usual. And we can't have business as usual.
Okay, Senator, you support then a constitutional amendment to balance the budget?
Yes. I voted for it in 1997 when it came within one vote. And sadly, that one vote was the only Republican that didn't support it. And it takes 2/3 vote, so 14 years ago, there was very much a consensus to do it. I hope that consensus is even stronger this time, considering that the budget situation is worse, much worse now than it was in 1997. 96 or 97.
All right, let's switch gears real quickly and talk about another big story that's unfolding this week. President Obama's about face on trying 9/11 terror suspects by a military tribunal. Why do you think the White House capitulated?
The White House capitulated because they were outright wrong. They misread the results of their election, and they found out what the people of the grassroots want in this country, and that grassroots were expressed even when the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress. It was very clear that the people of this country and the Congress wasn't going along with it. And it proves to you that Washington, D.C. and people that spend too much time in Washington, D.C. don't know what's going on in the rest of the country, that Washington, D.C. is an island surrounded by reality. But once in a while, common sense floats through to Washington, D.C., and this is one of the instances that proves that common sense wins out in Washington, but also for the electorate throughout the United States that might be seeing your program. I hope it gives hope to people that eventually elections and grassroots public opinion filters through to Washington to give the people of this country encouragement to keep in touch and keep the pressure on their members of Congress.
Do you think that this vindicates the George W. Bush administration?
Oh, very much it vindicates George W. Bush. It vindicates the whole history of prisoner of war, and the Geneva Convention was never meant to protect people who were outside of the usual military operations representing the actions of a particular nation state in warfare. And these people that we call terrorists and our war on terrorism they're operating outside of the realm of traditional rules of warfare, and were not covered by the Geneva Conventions, and that was the action upon which George Bush based his decision, and it was entirely the right decision.
Senator, President Obama has announced plans to run for a second term. Given the dismal state of the U.S. economy and unpopular policies like Obamacare, do you think President Obama can win re-election?
I think that he is headed for defeat based upon two things, maybe three things. One, Obamacare, the terrible situation with spending and the budget deficit and the fact that the economy is affected by that and there aren't jobs being created. And the third one is his attitude about America not being an exceptional nation. And I take, probably for the last reason more so than any other, he ought to not be reelected. And we have been considered exceptional. And we have a great deal of credibility based upon the fact that we have been looked upon as a different nation, as a world leader, and he wants to put us as a second-class nation, or let's just put it this way, not first among nations. And it's a threat to peace for that position he's taken.
Last question, Senator. Are you concerned no one from the GOP is formally committed to the presidential race as of yet?
No, in fact, it's probably a good thing. I think when you get down here closer to the election, you're going to have, and nobody announcing yet, or I better say closer to the caucuses in Iowa. Get closer to that time and nobody's announced. I think you're going to have 4 or 5 very serious candidates as opposed to 12 people that it's hard to tell which ones are serious or not serious.
All right, Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa, thanks so much for joining us. It's always great to have you on Newsmax TV.
Thank you very much.